Hello and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from D&D 5th edition, all while giving a small but quickly digestible history about them. Together we'll go over their origins within the game, how they're utilized in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. This week, we're going to be covering the Wrathborn undead, known literally for returning from the grave, Revenants. The Revenant as a monster has been present in all editions of D&D except for 4th edition, first showing up in the classic Fiend Folio and appearing as a CR5 undead in the current version of the game. Revenants are distinct from traditional corporeal undead such as zombies or skeletons in that they arise not from necromantic spells or innate negative energy, but from the living soul's urge for vengeance and justice. Whenever a person dies a horrible death and their soul cries out for revenge, this can form a tether that forcibly stitches their soul back into their body, allowing them to rise as a cognizant, wrathful undead creature. As such, Revenants keep the same appearance that they had in life, but emaciated with graying skin and a corpse-like visage, while still remaining recognizable to those who knew them in life. The magic that reforms them is powerful enough to restore entire bodies from being completely destroyed, such as those burned to ash or hit by a spell such as Disintegrate, and Revenants can remain active for years depending on the level of yearning that they hold in their hearts. They start this period of reanimation in full form and slowly decay over time, eventually crumbling into dust if enough time has passed. While their eyes remained dark and dull for most of the time, whenever they were confronted with their killer, a burning red light would suddenly form inside of their eyes the second that they came into view, suddenly filled with a power and rage to take revenge. In terms of their abilities, as stated before, Revenants are slowly driven by vengeance for their own death, almost to the point of outright ignoring the presence of those uninvolved. This need can extend to accomplices of the killer, and upon the successful slaying of the murderer by their own hands, the Revenant's body would then dissolve and break apart, allowing the soul to finally be put to rest and ascend. While arisen, Revenants retain most of the knowledge and abilities that they had in life, along with the added strength of undeath and a greater force of personality. This means that spellcaster Revenants can still cast magic, and certain races return some of their abilities, such as a Dragonborn's breath weapon, or a changeling's ability to modify their appearance. Revenants also had the ability to sense the general direction of their murderer, even across different planes. Upon meeting their killer, the Revenant's glowing eyes can cause their victim and anyone protecting them to be paralyzed with fear, their attacks growing a lot more potent and damaging when made against the specific target of their vengeance. Furthermore, clerics and paladins who rose as Revenants retain most of their holy abilities, save for that of turning undead or the ability to heal others. And there are even cases of gods answering the call of their faithful by turning them into Revenants, so they could seek their own justice and still do the good work of their deity. Now, when it comes to running Revenants at the table, one must always remember that they don't run on instinct like zombies or skeletons. They can think, talk, plan, lie, and develop strategies, and wholeheartedly retain the intellect and abilities that they had in life. A Sorcerer Revenant can retain their spells and metamagic abilities, just as a Fighter Revenant will recall all of their training and skill with the sword, so long as their body is still held together. This means that you are open to customize the origin, powers, and backstory of your Revenant to your liking, while allowing them to also vary their approach towards their revenge. A Rogue Revenant will be cunning and smart, and very keen to prevent their prey from discovering them until it's too late, while a Barbarian Revenant will come clambering through, swinging a giant axe without a care for subtlety. Coming back from the dead on a vengeance quest is a very classic avenue of storytelling, so be sure to give your Revenant a strong presence to prevent their players from being bored with their tried and true origin. If you want to make a Revenant NPC that the players are inclined to help, illustrate their past and make them likable so the players will empathize with their plight. The players could come across a cleric Revenant sitting on a rock and clutching their holy symbol in utter despair, having become the undead that they spent so much time slaying and putting to rest. Or perhaps the players come across a Revenant child who has returned not because they themselves want vengeance, but because their sibling or loved one is still in the clutches of the person who killed them. Or, and this is a personal favorite of mine, the party could instead discover the bound Revenant body of a powerful wizard, who manages to convince them to gather components for a ritual to return him to human form, only for them to discover that he actually was the big bad evil guy of another adventuring party, who successfully killed him but left his body to return as a Revenant. If the party ends up helping him, he can now seek vengeance against them and turn the party into his thralls unknowingly. All of these allow a party to have a bit more of a positive experience with your undead, which is especially good if you're trying to sell or justify the presence of a good aligned death cleric or necromancer in your party. Furthermore, depending on how strong you make this Revenant, you can hint at the power level of the person who killed them, should their killer be important to the game's story. A lot of players are going to wonder and be afraid of what could possibly kill a 15th level fighter or wizard. Now, on the other hand, of course you're going to want to have your players fight the Revenant, as they are wont to do in Dungeons & Dragons. But the best advice I can give you in order to make your Revenants memorable and not just stronger zombies is to make use of the Revenant's openness with their backstory and customization. Maybe one of the player characters had killed someone in their backstory. The Dungeon Master can have that person rise as a Revenant and now chase after them to this day, which can definitely risk putting the rest of the party in danger should they seek to defend him. A Revenant cleric or wizard could be especially dangerous as they can utilize their powers to raise other undead to control, meaning that they need not go on their crusade for vengeance alone. A Revenant is significantly more dangerous if it has a bunch of zombies, skeletons, and God forbid even higher level undead under its control. Or, your Revenant can actually be an old foe that the party has already fought, returning from the grave empowered with new undead abilities, and keen to take the party down as vengeance for their own demise. This could be a great way to bring back NPC villains that you enjoyed playing, especially if the party managed to stomp them the first time and you wanted to give them a second chance for a more impactful appearance. The party may be cocky and think that they can just take on the enemy once again, unaware of its newly acquired powers. Something to also remember is that Revenants immediately know when the target of their vengeance has been killed, and that their target's death wouldn't necessarily mean the destruction of the Revenant itself. They can remain active if they feel robbed of their chance at revenge, shifting that hatred towards the person who stole it from them. Additionally, the loophole of a person trying to escape a Revenant's wrath by killing themselves and then having themselves resurrected, while metagamey and unrealistic, can be matched with their resurrection causing the Revenant to rise up and return, continuing its journey to ensure the target's demise. And then of course there's the Revenant player character, which can be very interesting to run, but with the stipulation that they understand the goals and restrictions of their character's undead state. Unless the party manages to intervene in some way, if their character successfully kills the murderer or rights the wrongs that they had suffered, they will turn to dust and ascend to the afterlife, barring player or DM intervention. So DMs, please keep that in mind if your player is interested in taking on the role of a Revenant at your table. Now, when running Revenants in combat, I believe it is actually a disservice to use the base Revenant stat block for every Revenant that you run. Revenants by design are not exactly the same from one another. Their stories, paths, and skill sets will always be different from person to person. So if you want to illustrate that point, you are going to need to do a little bit more work than just using the base stat block. If your Revenant was an assassin, give them sneak attack and poison daggers. If they were a wizard, arm them with spells and a strategic intellect. Make your Revenant's danger not just lie in its undead abilities, but in the skills that it wielded in the past. If you do want to use the Revenant stat block as a base, you can find it on page 259 of the Monster Manual. They do hold a variety of condition immunities and are capable of regenerating health at a rate of 10 hit points per round, and are one of the few creatures that are immune to the effects of turn undead, adding a little bit more to their ruthless, relentless nature. Furthermore, be sure to remember that the Revenant's Vengeful Tracker ability allows it to innately know the direction of their killer. This is not considered a divination effect, which means that protection from divination magic or scrying will not defend against the Revenant's tracking, nor will go into other planes. I clarify this for all the rules lawyers out there. Beyond that, Revenants are also a very focused undead, meaning that they target only those involved in their murder while ignoring almost everyone else. As such, they will only attack other people if they pose a direct threat, or if they are actively protecting the target of their revenge. Even while in combat, they will often prioritize the death of their killer over the death of others, as Revenants deal more damage to the target of their revenge and will only pass on upon their death, or if proper burial rites are observed by a cleric or another ordained individual. That means that if your players are unable to tell that this undead is a Revenant over the course of the game, and they simply leave the body before voyaging off onto another adventure, the Revenant can reform using its rejuvenation ability and continue to stalk after them, now armed with the knowledge of their powers and abilities. In terms of magical items or loot for your players to find while defeating a Revenant, think about your Revenant's backstory and abilities. Wizard Revenants will have spellbooks filled with spells or arcane grimoires, Cleric Revenants will have Amulets of the Devout or Maces of Disruption, and Paladin Revenants could be walking around with a +5 Holy Avenger if you want. Revenants are offered a versatility that most other monsters aren't, so be sure to take advantage of that. Now, personally, I would believe that Revenants are impartial to weapons, items, and abilities that allow them to kill their target faster. So I would recommend checking out these items listed below for some inspiration. And finally, for our magic item in this video, we have the Eye of the Scorned, a crystallized eye plucked from a Revenant that is still active, but most likely imprisoned and unable to get it back. This item requires attunement and allows the wielder to cast the spell Hex at will, as well as the ability to cast the spell See Invisibility once per long rest. Additionally, once per short rest, upon casting either of these spells, the wielder can force the target of their cast of Hex, or a target who is revealed by the spell See Invisibility, to make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw, as a part of the same action used to cast the spell. On a failure, the target is paralyzed for 1d4 rounds, and is able to make a new saving throw to end the effect at the start of their turn as an action. Considering Revenants can run the spectrum in terms of level and strength depending on what backstory you apply to them, I figured this item wouldn't exactly be as strong as my previous ones, but still be very useful to add an additional ability to Hex considering the spell itself doesn't scale. I've included the item stat block in the description below, and that's the Revenant, everybody. I want to thank all of you guys for watching, and if you guys enjoyed the video, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and press the little bell icon to be notified of future videos. If you guys want to vote on the subject of the next video, you guys can follow the link in the description below to cast your vote. Finally, let me know what kind of encounters you guys have had with Revenants, or how you Dungeon Masters have used them in your games, and also let me know what kind of things you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.